Howdy, I'm Jammer. So, working in the library, you get all sorts of experiences, and I mean that in a just general positive way. You experience so much, even just on a single day. And one of the most interesting parts of my job is sort of just encountering people and all the different sort of questions that they ask. In the space of an hour, you may get a little old lady who wants to come up and find a book which is just basically, say, a Christmas themed murder mystery. And then the next patron who comes up may be a young black man who's interested in starting up a local nonprofit in the area and wants some books about it and then also some books about accounting. So you help them out. Next person who came in may be a teenager who found out that Stephanie Meyer put out a new Twilight book and wanted us to know where the YA section is, and you help them there. And then the city manager comes in, and maybe he's interested in y'all's collection of DC comics, and you're like, all right, yep, right up there at the graphic novel section. And he's like, okay, and then you go, cool. Excuse me. But one of the other interesting things about my job is that while I tend to help a wide variety of people find a wide variety of resources, the other sorts of people that I tend to encounter at the desk tend to be children. And here's the thing, children kind of freak me out. Part of the reason is because I have no interest in having children myself, so there's always been sort of a disconnect as well, but I'm always awkward around kids. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because they tend to be like people, but they're super small, but then they're also have like way better t-shirts than I do, which I will admit I'm a little bitter about. Why does a freaking 8-year-old boy get a t-shirt about with like Tyrannosaurus Rex shooting machine guns while riding a great white shark? Anyway, my bitterness about my lack of cool shirts aside, kids regularly come up to the desk and they ask me, hey, can you help me find books? And so because of this, I've taken it upon myself to try to make sure that I'm not just reading War and Peace on repeat. I mean, I'm not really. I'm just reading lots of Robert Crumb. But kids don't really like Robert Crumb, or they don't know who he is, and they really shouldn't be reading Robert Crumb. So at that moment, it becomes, how do I reconcile my love of comics with the fact that I also, interact with children on a day-by-day basis? Well, one of the ways I do that is I try to make sure to read plenty of children's books. Now, sometimes it just involves reading picture books, but then other times it involves, well, picking up some of those actual books that are coming out today. Now, I don't read a lot of the prose books because I don't have some interest and I don't really have a lot of the time for it. But I am willing to make time to read all the interesting kids' books that are coming out in terms of comics, because more and more publishing companies are beginning to realize, oh, this comics thing, there might actually be, like cultural merit to that, and also it might help kids want to learn how to read and enjoy reading. And maybe we can make some money doing that. Who knows? Whatever the case, because of that, I try to keep my eye on what are the books that are coming out. And I've done already on this channel the book Drama by Raina Telgemeier, and I'll probably do a couple more of her books sometime in the future. But while I was going to Ground Zero a couple weeks back, I noticed one book as I was sort of just browsing the store as I'm wont to do. I looked at it and I was like, yeah, cool, why not? And if the green shirt is not sort of hint enough about what today's video about, or, a few other things, excuse me, today's video is going to be about the book Green Lantern Legacy. Now, I had no prior knowledge of this book's existence. I also apologize that my lights are kind of making... There we go. I'll have to hold this at a weird angle to make sure it doesn't just become this big thing of weird light. Anyway, I wasn't even really aware that this book had come out. I hadn't seen, any publicity for it. I hadn't seen any reviews for it. I literally just stumbled upon this book while I was at Ground Zero Comics, and looking at the cover, I was like, that seems kind of interesting. Let's check it out and see what it's about. Also, fun fact, my library that I work at actually has a copy of this book. Like, literally a week after I got it, it was on the shelf. I was like, huh, well, okay. So, what exactly is Green Lantern Legacy? Well, in terms of the focus of today's video, we have to understand this is going to be a children's book. It's not necessarily young adult, largely due to the tone, the content of the book itself, the way the medium itself actually works. But before we get into all the stuff that we usually do on this channel, it's important to recognize This book is not really meant to be read, not really meant for adults. Adults can most definitely read it with their kids and enjoy it, but people who have read, say, Blackest Night, or say some of the Golden or Silver Age Green Lanterns, or even say some of like the Green Lantern Corps, or Larfleeze, or Red Lantern, or anything like that, this book is probably not for them. This book is designed primarily for kids who are just getting into the DC universe. So I'm going to call this sort of like a bridge book. It's somebody's first comic book that will sort of provide them an entrance into the, at times, Kafka-esque, but far more often times super badass and cool world of the Green Lanterns. But again, we're talking about a kid's book, so if you don't think that's really your jazz and you just want to see another Robert Crumb video, just skip past this one or go watch something else. You can find old stills of Fritz the Cat on YouTube. I guess do that if that's your thing. I'm partial to interviews with Francis Bacon myself, but that's because, again, nerd. Whatever the case, let's get into Green Lantern Legacy and what the book is actually about. All right, now... He conquers the world, and then he suddenly thinks he's the star of the show. Anyway, so what is Green Lantern Legacy about? The main story, and for the record, I read so many books that sometimes I forget small details, so excuse me if I have to use a little cheat sheet down here. But the story tends to focus on a character by the name of Tai. He is a third generation Vietnamese young man. He's about, I would say, somewhere between the ages of 10 and 12, and he works at a shop owned by his grandmother, who literally moved to the United States during the conflict of the Vietnam War. Her shop is regularly vandalized by teenagers in the local area, and she's also, in her own time, basically a sort of communal, she's a figure in her local and immediate community, which is for the most part largely composed of second and third generation Vietnamese immigrants, and then other immigrants that have sort of set up shop in the immediate area. So right off the bat, in terms of the content, this book does hold a sort of similarity to this book here, American-Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang. The sort of difference is that this book, while it contains a lot of references to Chinese mythology and a lot of, at times, sort of mythic, grandiose, this is not a superhero book by any capacity. But the tone is still pretty similar in the fact that this book is about a third-generation Chinese-American young man who's trying to just sort of reconcile his racial and ethnic identity with being an American, but then also at the same time not denying his Asian identity. This book follows in that sort of similar trend. However, it sort of also brings into play how the Green Lantern universe can sort of affect or really develop Ty's character as an individual. Now, near the beginning of the book, Ty's grandmother, a woman by the name of Kim Tran, I probably should have introduced that, she passes away. And what's important is, what sort of sets everything in motion is one night while he is asleep, he observes, or he wakes up to find that his grandmother's jade ring, see what they did there, has suddenly sort of wound up in his room. He tries to put it back, and then as you can clearly see here, something happens and the ring knocks him in the head. When he explains this to his grandmother, she says or tells him that the ring has chosen him. Not long thereafter, she passes away. Tai is extraordinarily sad, but one night he ultimately stumbles upon her ring, he puts it on, and is then transported to the planet of Oa, where he is introduced not only to the very concept of Green Lanterns, but also to a longtime fan favorite, Green Lantern John Stewart. Now, I don't know if you watched the Justice League growing up the way I did, but I freaking loved John Stewart. He was so cool. I mean, there was nothing wrong with Hal Jordan. He was all right. But John Stewart was just really tough and smart and, like, well-spoken. He was basically the kind of person I would want to be, you know, if I could be a superhero. Because I wasn't the cocky jerk that Hal Jordan was. And it also didn't help that, like, Phil LaMarr did the voice, and anytime Phil LaMarr does the voice of anybody, it's like, yes. Yes. Whatever the case, Jon Stewart introduces Ty to the very concept of the Green Lantern universe. He provides the backstory and informs him that his mother, Kim, was in fact a Green Lantern and was put largely in charge of defending planet Earth from a particular evil character, a man by the name of Sinestro. Da-da-da! Okay. Whatever the case, Ty becomes introduced to the reality of Green Lanterns versus the Yellow Lantern conflict, which then allows him to sort of struggle with the fact that he as an immigrant, or he as an Asian, I cannot talk tonight, excuse me. He, as a young man who is Asian, is consistently picked on by numerous children in his class who are predominantly, well, racist. And so in this way, the book explores how the notions of will and justice, because we ultimately determine that the bullies who are picking on him on a regular basis are also the ones who have been consistently throwing a brick through the window of his grandmother's convenience store for years. Now, the book ultimately incorporates the notion of how Ty, as a Green Lantern, is ultimately going to sort of find his will, his strength, and how he's going to sort of live his life. The story follows Ty as he encounters a sort of, not billionaire playboy, but a kind of billionaire philanthropist by the name of Xander Griffin. Now, if you don't want spoilers, stop the video now. I'm about to shit something really, really important. Are you gone? Are you sure you're gone? Are you really gone? I don't think you're gone. Come on, you're ruining this for everybody. Come on. Okay. Hey, get out of here. Go on. Okay. Can you believe them? Anyway, what we eventually discover is that Xander Griffin wants to purchase up a lot of the territory that Ty lives in for the purpose of sort of rebuilding the neighborhood for a sort of overall philanthropic project. What we ultimately discover, however, is that Xander Griffin is, of course he is, a Yellow Lantern. This development of Ty trying to find himself and then also sort of regularly interacting with this man by the name of Xander Griffin gives the story a kind of conflict as Ty has to try to reconcile how do you balance will, how do you balance fear and insecurity, and then ultimately how do you be a good person. Again, the conflict is pretty simple in its construction, but that's because it's trying to be. The story is not anything as elaborate as, say, Blackest Night, where we have this intergalactic conflict about the notions of life, death, will, all that jazz. This book is predominantly about a young man who's trying to find his individual strength as a human being, trying to figure out what are the forces that are pushing me and pulling me. How do I stay a good friend? He possesses two friends in the book by the name of Serena and Tommy. At one point, we have the three of them being alienated from each other, but there's a quick reconciliation because, again, it's a kid's book. But what's important here, and what I think should not be taken away from this book, is the way it does manage to use the Green Lantern universe as a way to just tell a cute little Bildungsroman or a little coming-of-age story. At the end of this book, Ty is not an emotionally mature adult. He's still a kid by the very end of the story, but at the same time, he's learned, he's progressed, and he's managed to recognize what he perceives to be right, what he perceives to be just, and what he perceives to ultimately be a real threat to his virtue and his integrity. And I think that's pretty cool. Like, those are a lot of really heavy concepts, especially for a kid to be able to process. Nevertheless, Green Lantern Legacy manages to do this in a pretty fun and legit story. And also, before you ask anything, yes, he manages to defeat Xander Griffin at the very end of the book. And then, of course, because it's a cool, fun kids book, we ultimately observe Jon Stewart coming back to Earth, trying to see, hey, you need anything? Ty's like, no, man, we got this. But I could use your help for something. What? Well, we have these neighbors in the neighborhood. They happen to be Middle Eastern, and we thought, it might be really sweet. Let's bring them some groceries. So what's really interesting to me about Green Lantern Legacy is it's an opportunity to sort of allow kids to explore some of the more complicated aspects of the Green Lantern universe, but also more importantly, just to introduce them to the Green Lantern universe and introduce them to the notion of what the Green Lantern universe is, which is the notion that justice is not ultimately about color. But it kind of is at the same time. Okay, worded that poorly. Let's try another way. Ultimately, the Green Lantern universe is a diverse universe which covers the entire galaxy. So ultimately, the strength of a Green Lantern is the ability to recognize life in all of its differences and manifestations, the way it can grow, the way it can change, and ultimately using willpower rather than fear or rage or jealousy in order to protect the ones that we care the most about in this world. And then, at the same time, it manages to tell a really beautiful story about a young man, a young Asian man, coming of age in America, reconciling his racial identity, and not allowing race hatred and bigotry to warp him into fear or hatred. Rather, recognizing instead what is far stronger and what is going to be far more conducive to my growth is instead offering my will, offering my kindness, offering my hope. Which, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so we've talked a lot now about what is the content of this book, and I did that again because it's a kid's book. More of the emphasis is going to be on the content. But does Green Lantern Legacy have anything to offer to us, formally speaking? Well, I think it offers at least a little bit, and so we're going to talk at least a little bit here now about what is the form of Green Lantern Legacy and why we should care. All right. Now, one of the last videos I did, or at least one of the last videos I recorded, was about Faith Volume 1, Hollywood and Vine, and I pointed out that, again, that was a superhero book. So in terms of the form of comics, it's going to be very action-oriented. It's not really so much going to be about personal introspection. It's not going to be about long exchanges of dialogue in order to sort of come to a new realization or a new depth of character. It's really more about a character acting and acting physically through her sort of abilities as a psionic. Had to make sure I got that right. I may have messed that up. If I did, somebody point that out in the comment section, and I apologize to my friend Michael, who worships everything faith. Anyway, when we look at Green Lantern Legacy, we have to understand that we are also talking about a superhero book, but we're not going to be looking at it the way we would with, say, another Green Lantern book. I just realized how bright and light this is. Okay, there we go. Again, if we're looking at something, say, a page from Blackest Night, one of the sort of climax scenes in the book is this huge two-panel page in which Hal Jordan and Larfleeze and Sinestro and all the big guys of all the Green Lantern universes are all doing their little mantras and charging up their lanterns, and then, of course, at the very end, Larfleeze goes, eh. Leading me, ultimately, let me see. Yes, leading Lee, ultimately, to one of my favorite panels in any comic book ever, Atrocitus just screaming, "Let me kill him!" I love Larfleeze. Anyway, but looking at this from a formal perspective, we see there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of concern for the colors. There's a lot of concern for the dramatic angle at which the reader is encountering this book. It's very action-driven. It would be a mistake, I think, to assume that the same isn't here for Green Lantern Legacy. Again, most of the experimentation that takes place in this small comic, in this small graphic novel, is going to be focused more on action. And again, because it's a kid's book, you're not going to have the same level of nuance that you might, say, in a more adult graphic novel. This is really designed to help kids move through the panels quickly, because we have to remember, in terms of their reading skills, they are still ultimately in a point of development. And sometimes comics can be difficult if the panels are not laid out the right way. One of the good things, though, about Green Lantern Legacy, and I just realized we're this far in without me mentioning the author's name, Again, we have Minh Lee and Andie Tong. And again, as always, I am an East Texas boy. I have a speech impediment. These are two gentlemen who are of Vietnamese ancestry. I guarantee you I butchered their names, and I am sincerely sorry for it. I really wish I had studied more Asian languages growing up, but I live in Texas, so they teach you Spanish. Anyway, what's interesting about Green Lantern Legacy, if I go back to that page I had a moment ago, there's still a real good concern for action. You can see here there's a concern for using line work and perspective in order to convey action. Body language here is done really good to show how Tai is dodging this huge crater. We have these onomatopoeias that will just fill the page. There's a nice balance of color constantly throughout this book. It's not as nice as I would want it to be personally, but we're still able to see how they're using color and how they're using the arrangement of the panels to ultimately convey emotion and to convey meaning. Here in this passage, this whole page where Xander Griffin ultimately reveals himself, you see that we have these two sort of smaller panels as we're sort of ultimately left up to his announcement that he is saying Yellow Lantern. At that moment, this reveal is given almost the entire page because we have to remember at this point, Tai has been instructed of who Sinestro is and who the Yellow Lanterns are, and they're these weird, creepy bad guys who want to use fear in order to sort of establish order in the world rather than using willpower and kindness and empathy. And so at that moment, you see Lee and Tong using the full page panel in order to sort of create a dramatic moment for the young reader. Kids are going to see the words Yellow Lantern, see all that yellow and go, oh, no, that's cool. Now, going back to another earlier passage here, when Tai originally lands on the planet Oa, this two-page panel as well really, I think, shows a sort of continual concern for the medium. There's a lot of large horizontal panels that are largely designed just to show a lot of the crazy world and a lot of the cool science fiction stuff that Tai is observing for the most part, but it also gives Lee and Tong opportunities to sort of play with dramatic action. If you look at, say, one of the earlier starts of the book, we're able to see the passage where Kim and Tai are talking, and then ultimately a brick is hurled through the window. You can see, again, there's a nice creative choice in showing the brick striking the pane right before it shatters, followed immediately by the automatopoeia and then the broken glass itself. These are small, creative choices, but they're good choices. And in this way, I don't think Green Lantern Legacy necessarily contributes anything new or dramatically original, but it does manage to do more than just set up a couple of square panels and have a bunch of talking heads. Green Lantern Legacy is a superhero book, and I think it does a really good job of showing and introducing kids how action-driven comics are ultimately going to work. The energy is going to be conveyed through strong motions of the characters, through interesting camera angles, through color work. And especially when we're talking about something like Green Lantern, we're ultimately going to be talking about all these cool, super dope projections that are coming out of the Green Lantern ring. And so in this way, again, I don't think this is going to be a terribly dramatic read for longtime fans of Green Lanterns, but for a kid who's just hopping into this universe, Green Lantern Legacy is going to be a really fun and interesting book, and it's going to show them what is possible through the medium of comics when you sort of do more than just show static, stationary characters. If you take a concerted effort to arrange them on the page the right way, you can achieve some really interesting dramatic and narrative techniques. So with all that said and done, let's do the final hurrah. Call it a day. All right, now, really? You gotta, okay, all right. Get out of here, you're grounded. Macedonians. Anyway, Green Lantern Legacy by Minh Lee and Andie Tong. This book is fun. I mean, again, that's really what's going to be the gist of most of what I'm talking about here. Green Lantern Legacy is a fun book, and it's a really, in my opinion, good book to get a kid started into the Green Lantern universe, because It doesn't throw too much at the reader at one time, and it also offers a lot of really good lessons and ideas that young readers can process. Again, one of the things that's always made me love the Green Lantern universe is its diversity. It doesn't matter who's wearing the green ring. It could literally be a big ball of gas with a floating skull, and it could wear or wield a Green Lantern ring. So, why the hell shouldn't a young Vietnamese kid be allowed to be a Green Lantern? And for that matter, be able to take on a fully grown adult Yellow Lantern? Again, there's more and more concern for diversity in comics, and I think Green Lantern Legacy is a really interesting opportunity to sort of explore that idea, not to mention introduce a character who might be a more interesting character as he continues to grow and get more opportunities to be read more by readers. We could very well see a future where Ty Tran may become a future Green Lantern and be fighting alongside Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. I can dream. And then, formally speaking, Green Lantern Legacy offers a lot to the reader, especially the young reader, in terms of introducing them to the dynamic play of superhero comics and shows them how action-driven comics can work, and by showing them how, using a wide variety of panel shapes and layouts, you can use those layouts, use the form, in order to enhance the narrative that you're trying to tell. Green Lantern Legacy is going to be a great book for kids. It's going to be a great Green Lantern story, and I would definitely recommend you read it. Even if you've never read a kid's graphic novel in your life, this is a pretty easy read. It'll take you less than an hour to read it, and when you're done, it may not be, say, again, Blackest Night or Green Lantern Corps, or even, say, Green Lantern, where he's throwing a ring down at the feet of Sinestro, who's giggling and cackling, and God, old comics can be weird as hell sometimes. But it's still going to be part of the Green Lantern lore, in my opinion, and I think that's really cool, and I'm really excited for this next generation of kids that's going to have a book like this on the shelves. Alright, I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching. This video was way longer than I thought it would be. I thought it would be maybe 20 minutes at the top, if that, but hey, if you're still watching, you rock, you're awesome, I love you so much, no homo, just kidding, tons of homo. So thank you for keep watching. Like I said, I found this at my my comic book shop, Ground Zero Comics. So I guarantee you, your local comic book shop probably has ordered a copy of this. If they haven't, just ask them, and they probably can order a copy of it for you. And then, of course, as I mentioned at the start, you can probably find a copy at your local public library. And if they don't have it, just ask for an interlibrary loan form. As always, like, share, and subscribe, all that jazz. It lets me know that you're liking these videos and you want to see more, or at the very least you want to see all the sort of weird outfits, or maybe you just want to see all the wacky statues that I have in my office. Whatever the case, hey, thanks for watching. I tremendously appreciate it. Go read some comics.